All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Django associations, otherwise known as relationships, and we're also going to be diving a little bit into the Django server in part two. Now, we've talked about relationships, how they're built within SQL, and how we can build relationships from one data table to another. Well, we can do the same thing inside of Django. Let's talk about how we would do that. There's a couple of different types of associations. Here we have an association where we have a one-to-one field. And you can see there that there's a passport tied to one traveler. There's a one-to-many field where you can see that many luggage is attached to one passenger. And you can also see that there's a many-to-many field where maybe a passenger may be attending multiple planes inside of one airport. For example, when they land, they may be offloading one airplane and then onloading onto the next. Now, we've seen all of these inside of PostgreSQL and how to write it in SQL language, but you can see that in Django, it's a little bit more straightforward. We have a models dot, and then we specify what kind of field we're going to work with. We have a one-to-one field. There's also a many-to-many field. The only one that's a little bit tricky, it's going to be that foreign key. All right, so that foreign key stands for many-to-one field. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. Well, since no one has any questions, let's go ahead and move forward into the different types of associations and how we may be able to see them or depict them. Right. So here we have a six-piece set that's a medium charcoal gray wood finish, um, four simple ladder back chairs, and bench included with plushy upholstered seat cushions and a practical polyfiber for on-trend appeal. Okay, so that's the whole description that falls into this dining set. So you can see here, there's a visual representation as to what the model may look like. First, we have a establishment of a dining set that everything would belong to. There's a name, which in this case is a six-piece set, and then we have our color, which we have medium charcoal gray as our color. A stool, well, there's only one stool per dining set, so I would assume that this is a one-to-one relationship. So here we have our stool, the length of the stool, width of the stool. Well, it's a rectangle, so here's the width and length. That might be something useful for somebody to utilize when they're trying to measure out their dining set in their living room. And then there's the dining set. And you can see here that we have a one-to-one field. Notice the way it's establishing the relationship is simply by stating, hey, we want to establish a relationship with the model of dining set. And that's the model that we see up above. We then have a related name field, which I'll talk about once we get into actually seeing some programmatic examples. And we have the on delete models.cascade. Well, look at that. A lot of times when you're writing relationships, you're gonna end up in a place where you're wondering, where is it that I should build a relationship? Should I put it within the dining set or should I put it within the stool itself, right? The way to think about it is how is it that you want models to go about being removed from your database? For example, if a stool is removed from the dining set, I would still want all four of these chairs and the actual table itself to still exist within my database. I wouldn't want it to be removed. So I would not put the relationship within the dining set level. Instead, I would put it within the stool level. Because if I were to lose the entire dining set, well, I don't want to see any of the chairs, the table, nor the stool still represented in my database or my data table, right? I would just want them all to be removed. So this models.cascade means, hey, if the stool is tied to, let's say, the entry of one from the dining set, and the entry of one is deleted, then so should this stool be deleted along with it. right? It's cascade because as one is deleted, it cascades to the next model, to the next, and to the next. Kind of like cascading style sheets. That's one way to think about it. All right, then we have our chairs, where here in our chairs, we're seeing the height of the chair. We're seeing a short little description, and then the dining set that it belongs to. You can see here that it's aiming or for a foreign key relationship, which is a many to one. In this case, we have four chairs that belong to a dining set. And ideally, I would have seen a table here as well, but it looks like the table is missing. The table would probably be a one-to-one relationship along to the dining set. And then we have a kitchen. Well, one dining set may be in multiple kitchens, and one kitchen may have multiple dining sets. All right. So in that case, you would have a many-to-many relationship where many different dining sets can belong inside of many different kitchens. Does anyone have any questions regarding this example of the dining set? Great. Doesn't seem like we have any questions. Let's go ahead and continue pushing forward here. All right. So now we're at the part where it's time to see some actual code. So let's start writing some association code in Django. Now, before we dive into that, in part one today, we're going to learn what are relationships and how they are necessary. Creating multiple applications in Django. We'll go about creating a new model, registering the app on the model Django site, creating a serializer, creating a new instance. We'll then dive into the Django ORM relationships, one-to-one, many-to-many, and many-to-one. Now, let me go ahead and scroll over here on our example that we've been working on TLDraw. Today, we're going to be talking about relationships, and I just want everybody to be tracking that the concept of relationships still falls within our models portion. All right, so here I can go ahead and open up a model, or I can state, hey, relationships also fall within the model. For example, if I go to take a look at the Rick and Morty API, which is what we're seeing here, and I go to see all characters, well, we can see that in our original response from our characters, we have ID, name, status, species, type, gender. We have image, URL, and created. All of these are direct entry points that are created by the character model. But then we have these nested objects like origin. We have location. That's also a nested object. And we have episodes. Well, all of these are different data tables that have a relationship. So for example, we have the character of Rick and Morty that is tied to an origin where the data table of entry 1 for Rick Sanchez is tied to origin of maybe entry 2. And more than likely something like, hey, if we had Morty being represented here where he would have an entry of 2, he would also be tied to the key of 2 for origin. Right? So that's just how the serialized JSON data ends up being on the other side. All right, so we're still working within our models portion. We're going to be tying it into our serializer as far as how to serialize data. But first things first, we have to learn how to create another app, how to register the app onto the Django admin site, creating a serializer for said app or the model that we're representing, and then creating a new instance. So here's part one of our project or of what we'll be talking about today. Here we have our Poke API project. That's where my directory is currently in. Now I'm going to go about creating some new information. I'm going to create a new app, and this one's going to be representing the moves that different Pokemon can learn. So I'll start off by stating Python manage UI. I'll start an app, and I'll call this the move app. And this will be utilized to install all of my moves. It looks like I'm missing REST framework. So I'm gonna go ahead and pip install Django REST framework. Ensure that's reflected on my requirements.txt. So pip freeze requirements.txt. Great. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and run that command of Python manage py start app move app. So it's going to take a while. You'll see that a new directory was created here named move app. We can see it here on my left-hand side. And if I go to open it up, you'll see that I have a new migrations file. Everything that originally came with the Pokemon app is being replicated here. Well, now we just repeat the process, right? We come over to the models. I can say, hey, I have a model that I want to register. This one's going to be the class of move. Let me go ahead and put this to sleep. The move is going to be a model field because I want to create a database or a data table. This model will have something like name, which is equal to models.char field. This model will have accuracy, which will be models.positive integer field. That way I don't have to worry about negative information. I'll have PP, which is another positive integer field. And I'll also have power, which it'll be a positive integer field. Finally, I'll return a dunder string method. So I'll have a string method at the bottom. It takes in self and will return an F string representing my model. So I'll say, hey, this is the move. The move has a name, which will be of self.name. And it also holds, for now, I'll just display the accuracy as well. All right. So there's my application so far. Right here's my model. It can have all of my fields. What would be the next step? When I'm creating a new model, what happens after I create the initial stretch of what I want my model to look like? What would I want to add after that?
You want to do your migrations?
Okay, I could do some migrations. What about prior to migrations? I still want to mutate this data table.
Um, Serialized, perhaps?
Okay, so I could serialize. What I'm looking for in this case is going to be validators, right? I want to add some constraints to this table. So let's go ahead and do that. We have my my models.char field here. I could easily make a validators file. So I'm going to go ahead and touch inside of the move app, a validators.py. And in validators.py, I'll go ahead and say from Django.core.exceptions, I want to import validation error. I'll make a function named validate move name that will take in a name as a string and will either return a string or raise a validation error. From there, I'll say if name is equal to name.title. So if it is in title format, then I will return the name. Otherwise, I will raise a validation error saying name must be written in title format. So there's my validation for my name. I can come over to name, or excuse me, to models, say from .validators. I want to import validate move name. I can also bring in the rest of my validators. I can go from Django.core, import validators as V. So let's start off here. For name, I can say, hey, I have some validators here, and what I want you to validate will be my validate move validator. For accuracy, well, for accuracy, I can add a default value here, where the default value will always be of 70. I can add some validators as well, such as my min value validator, where I can say the minimum value would be of 1, and my max value would be of 100. Okay, so for PP, I could have this be of default, let's go ahead and say 10. For validators, again, I'm going to utilize my min and max value. No, I forgot to add a comma in there. So I'll add my min value validator, which would be 0, and then my max value validator, where my max value validator would be of, I believe the most I've ever seen is 30. All right, and then power, we can say that the default for power will be 40. We can still add validators, such as min value validators being 1. And then we have max value validators, where max value validators could be all the way up to, let's do 150. All right. And there you go. I have my brand new model with validation created and ready to be moved into my database. Does anyone have any questions over how we created this new app or how we created this new model? Okay, if no one has any questions, let's go ahead and try to make this into a database entry. How could I represent the class of move inside of my database? As of right now, if I go into my Poke API DB, and I try to take a look at all of the relationships, you'll see that in all of my relationships, I only have the Pokemon app Pokemon. So how do I add this move app? All right, go ahead, Tom.
Wouldn't now be the time to make your migrations?
All right, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and run Python, manage PY, make migrations. I'm getting no changes detected. So there must have been a step that I just missed. All right. Well, let's remember when I execute a command, it goes Python manage PY. And this manage PY is always going to read what file first?
Oh,
You have to add the app to your settings.
Yeah, it's always going to read settings.py. So I have to come over to my project, take a look at settings.py, and in settings.py, under installed apps, it has to be aware that it exists. So I have to come down and add move app and end it with the comma. Now when I run make migrations, it's able to identify the application and create a new migrations file. Okay, awesome. Well, what about the process of actually seeing it in the database? Because as of right now, all I did was create a migrations file. I could open this up and we can see the 001 for migrations, which is initial equals true. How do I get it into my database?
You migrate it.
Yeah, now it's just a simple step of Python, manage PY, migrate. All right, awesome. Now, just to have it inside of the Django admin site, I'm going to go ahead and add it inside of my admin as well. I'll go ahead and say admin.site.register. And here I'll add the move model. I'll say from.models import move. All right. Now comes the process of actually making the connection. But before we go into making the connection between the move and all of our Pokemon, I want to talk about the different examples of how we can actually make a connection here. So I'm going to change directory into this relationships project that I have here. And you'll see that in this relationships project, I have no other applications other than my project itself. So I'm going to start making a couple of apps here. So I'm going to go ahead and start by making a start app, one-to-one app. I will make a many-to-one app. And then I'll create a many-to-many app, just so that we can see it all isolated. I'm going to come over to my settings.py and add each one of them. So I'll say many-to-many app. I'll add my one-to-one app and my many-to-one app. All right, awesome. You can go ahead and stop here and open it up for questions. Go ahead, Alex.
I don't know if I missed it, but what were we doing in the admin's PY when we registered the model?
So in Move app, inside of admin.py, this is what actually lets us see it inside of the Django admin site. I believe we saw this last week on Thursday, but we'll see it again here shortly. So I'll just do a callback once I start demonstrating it.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course. All right, any other questions? All right, doesn't seem like there are any other questions. So let's go back into this relationships application. So in this relationships, let's talk about our one-to-one app here. So a scenario we would have one-to-one. Let's talk about something where, for example, we already saw the example of somebody boarding the plane. Well, what about a social media platform? So social media platform. Every independent user, so every app user of said platform may have something like a profile where a profile is unique to each user. All right. And now let's talk about how things should be deleted, right? If a profile is deleted, the app user should remain because they can possibly delete their profile and just start from scratch, right? But if an app user is deleted, their profile should be deleted as well. All right. So now with that said, with those little parameters stated, we can go ahead and actually create our social media platform. So here I can say class. I have my app user, which will be a model. My app user may have something like a username, which can be Charfield. We can have something like an email, which will just simply be an email field. I'm not going to add validators to these two because I don't want to overcomplicate things. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a profile where the profile is also going to be a model. It may have a couple of different things, and maybe it includes a bio, which is a text field. It may include like age, which would be a positive integer field. And it may include a couple of other things, but more importantly, it would have a user that it would be tied to. And here we would specify that we want a one-to-one field relationship. So you can see that there's one-to-one relationship and one-to-one field. We're going to utilize fields in this case. And then we're going to specify what we want to make the connection to. Well, we want to make the connection to the app user. And we want on delete for models.cascade. All right. Well, what about a way for the app user to be able to call on this profile? Because we need a way for it to be able to reference it and speak to it. Right? As of right now, if I go into Python manage PY, make migrations, and say Python manage PY, migrate. It migrates everything into an SQLite database, which we won't be able to see, which actually, let me go ahead and change that really quick here. Because I actually do want to be able to see these connections. Okay, so now everything is migrated into the database of RelayDB. Well, let me show you guys something, all right? Let's go ahead and actually open up a Python script. I'm going to write this down as some sort of playground. So if in this playground I say from one-to-one app dot models, I want to import everything, all right? Or in this case, let's say I want to import the app user and I want to import the profile. Well, I can go into the process of creating a new user by saying, hey, I want to create a new app user. This app user will have a name of, I don't know, let's just go with Francisco. And it will also have an email of fr.fr.com. All right. I believe those are the only two that we have there. Yep. And then we go into our bio. I'll say, hey, new profile is equal to a profile. Where for this profile, we have a bio. Francisco. We have an age. And then I believe after that, we just have the user, where we would tie the user to the new user. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Let me go ahead and run .save. And then we'll try to execute this where the new profile will also be saved. I'll say Python manage py shell. We're seeing new user is not defined. We're seeing a couple of errors already. Interesting. Oh, it got an unexpected keyword, which should be username. Okay, interesting. There you go. So let me go ahead and exit. Enter again. Copy this and paste this. All right. So now we see a profile was created. We have a new user that has been created. Then we have our new profile. It gets saved. And both my profile and my user were saved. Let's make sure that actually happened. I'm going to go ahead and connect to this relationships DB. And here I want to see a couple of relationships. Here I have my one-to-one app user, and my profile, both showing up. I can say select all from my one-to-one app user. And here you can see we have Francisco being entered. I can then run select all from one-to-one where I want to see the profile. And then you can see that we have the first entry where I am Francisco has been created, age of 27, tied by the user ID of 1. All right, so there's the whole application, everything that's going on in the background, and how everything's connecting to one another. Well, let's talk about a little bit of accessibility. For example, if I wanted to see the information of my user, I can simply enter by the profile to the user. As such, I can say new profile dot user dot username. And if I go into printing this, we're actually going to see the username show up. We can see Francisco is being accessed, right? We're going through the profile, accessing the user instance, and then bringing back the name. Well, what about from the user? Can I see the profile from the user instance? Let's try it out. Let's try to, or I got this backwards. Enter the user through profile. And now let's go ahead and try to enter the profile through the user. Or if I say new user dot profile dot, let's just say bio, and I try to print this out, let's see what kind of error we would get. Okay, so in this case, it's actually working, right? And it's able to print I am Francisco. All right, well, how is this possible? What is happening here? Well, when I make this connection here to the app user, it's automatically creating a field named profile right under there. Now, we ourselves can actually overwrite what this field is called. For example, I can name this related name and explicitly state what it is that I want it to be referenced as. For example, I could say, hey, this is user profile. And then all I would have to do in my playground is change it to user profile. I go to exit, come back into my shell. Let's bring back that user. We can go ahead and take a look, make sure that user is the correct one. All right, and let's print this out. We're going to go into user.profile.bio. When I get an error, it's telling me, hey, the app user has no attribute, name profile, which is what I expected. I just changed it so that it's explicitly referenced as user profile. By doing that, it's as if I just added a field named user profile is equal to the profile instance that's tied by key. So now I can highlight this and print it out. No. And there you can see we get I am Francisco. So that related name field is actually pretty important. All right, does anyone have any questions over the one-to-one connection there? Let's hear it, Tom.
I could be wrong since I believe we deleted it now, but the related name, if we attached it to the profile, um, doesn't matter where. Is it just referencing the model profile? Is that why we still had to do the .bio at the end to get it? Or
It
does
is.
it, or can it be tied to a specific attribute?
No, so the related name is in reference to the profile itself.
Got it.
Awesome. Alex?
Did we create these different apps just for uh the dry method? Just to keep, or is it the dry method? Or just to keep everything organized? Or was it
Yeah, we're just
necessary to create all these apps?
definitely not necessary to create all these apps. It's more to establish the single responsibility principle, right? Where every one thing is for one purpose. And then this is just to keep the code clean so that whenever the demos and notes goes out, everyone can find, oh, this is everything that we did for one-to-one. This is everything that we did for many, and so on. Does that answer your
Got it.
question, Alex?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other questions? All right, fantastic. If there aren't any other questions, then let's dive into, well, how does this affect my serializers? Right, because all of this probably made a drastic change to my serialization process. Well, let me go ahead and exit here. I'm going to go ahead and make a serializers file. And inside of the serializers file, I'll say from REST framework dot serializers import model serializer. And I should probably also specify in my settings that I'll be utilizing REST framework as well. All right. And then from here, I can go into my models. From dot models, I want to import both my app user and I want to import my profile. Now, this could be pretty simple, right? I can make, hey, a profile serializer where my profile serializer takes in serializer, there you go, takes in a model serializer. I can specify my class of meta, say fields, or excuse me, model. Here I would say profile, fields. I could specify that what I want to see is all. And same thing with my app user. Where I can have my model serializer, open up my class meta, specify my model, and specify the fields that I want to work with. All pretty simple as of now. I'm going to come over to my playground and actually implement these serializers. All right, first things first, I want to grab my user, where my user is going to grab my app user serializer. So I'll say from one-to-one app dot serializers. I want to import my app user serializer. I want to import my profile and my profile serializer. From here, I'm going to grab the actual app user itself, and I'll grab the profile. And I just want to go through the process of serializing each one of them. Well, I'll say serial user is equal to the app user serializer, where I want to see the user. And then I just want to simply print out the data. So I'll say user or serialized user dot data and see what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and take this all, copy it so that we can see it on the shell. You can see when I run the data, I can see in my ID, my username, and my email field, right? Everything's being included in there. Great. Well, let's see it from the profile perspective. Let's run profile or serialized profile be equal to profile serializer. That will take in the profile. And let's print out my serialized profile data. Well, there we can see we have the ID of 1, bio, I am Francisco, age, and the user of 1. All right, awesome. Well, this user of 1 isn't really useful for me. And also, there's likely a chance that instead of pulling data from the profile, I would probably want to see the entire profile nested within the ID. All right. So I could have something like this, where I can grab my app user, I specify that for the field of user profile, which is what we have in our related name field, user profile. So I can just copy that, bring it over to the serializer, ensure that's the same. Well, in my user profile, I would want my profile serializer to be utilized. Well, now let's see what happens when I run this first portion of my code. Again, I'm going to enter the shell and execute this first portion. Well, now when I see the serialized data of the user, I have my ID. You can see the user profile is also being represented, showing us the bio, age, and the user it's tied to, and then the username. If you don't want to have repetitive information, like, hey, I don't want to see the user in there, I can always go back to my serializer. Rather than having all for my profile, I can always add the excludes and say excludes be equal to ID. Again, I can exit, run the shell, paste it all again. And it looks like I have something going on here. Let me see. Creating model shows without either the fields attribute or the exclude. Oh, it's exclude, not excludes. There you go. And now when we run it, we can see that we have the bio, not representing the ID, but I meant to say user in here. I apologize, everyone. Third time's the charm, maybe fourth time. Let's see. There you go. We still have the ID of the profile itself, but we don't have the ID of the user anymore because we have it represented at the very top. All right, and that's essentially what's happening here in the Rick and Morty API. When we're sending this request and information's coming back, we're seeing all of the original data regarding the character itself, and origin It's just a relational or a relational data that's being implanted into the serializer. All right, it's saying, hey, this is a relational data table that we have a connection to, and this is how I want that serializer to be nested within my character serializer. All right. Does anyone have any questions over how we created the serializer and how we can nest it within one another? All right, doesn't seem like we have any questions. So now let's go ahead and talk about the process of actually utilizing serializers to create an object, right? All we've done in this portion is we've read data. So read serializers. But what about the part of creating or updating information within our serializers? Well, let's check it out because we would definitely expect it to not be so complicated or to not add any curveballs. Well, let's go ahead and create some create serializers. And let's see how that application turns out. Well, here I'm going to have a new user, or let's call it user data. And let's make this a username of Avila, where email is of av@av.com. And let's have a new profile here. Well, let's call it profile data be equal to where we have a bio, where we can say Avila is my last name. We can have an age. Let's make this 32. And we could have something like a user. And let's say that the user that we are tied to will be of 2, right? Because we expect this to be the data entry number 2. All right, well, looking at this user flow, the first one that needs to be created would be the user data. A profile cannot exist until the user for said profile exists first. All right. So let's see what happens when I try to create this user. I'll say, hey, new user is equal to app user serializer, where the data that I'm going to be passing in will be of user data. And I'm just going to ask, hey, is this new user valid? And if so, I want the new user to be saved. I'm going to actually take this dictionary out of the way here. And I'm going to paste this down below. And I will bring back this annotation for the create serializers. I'm just trying to clean up my file as much as I can before starting to use the shell. All right, so here's the data that I'm going to be executing. I'm going to import all of my information, and I'm going to try to create a new user. Let's see what happens here. So I'm going to copy it all. I'm going to run Python manage py shell. And you can see that when I run my new user.isValid, I'm getting false. I was able to accept my data, but it's telling me that this data is invalid. Well, let's take a look at the errors. Here in user profile, I'm getting this field is required in order for the code to be accessible. So now it's just throwing a little bit of a curveball into how I can actually create new data entries. And we're going to talk about how to fix that here shortly. But before we continue, we're almost at the hour mark, and this is going to be a good spot to open it up for questions and then take a break. So at this point, does anyone have any questions over any of the material that I've covered? All right, if no one has any questions, let me go ahead and pause our recording here. All right, welcome back, everyone. So as we just saw, our serializer just isn't doing the trick anymore, right? It's running into some issues, and it's not actually able to run our serializer data. Well, I could do a couple of mutations here. For example, my user profile for my profile serializer, I could change this to, hey, I want this to be a read-only attribute, and change this to be true. Well, when I do this, technically now it's read-only. I should still be able to see a serialized version of my profile. So for example, this first portion should still work perfectly fine. All right, let's go ahead and import all of our information that we'll need. So I can import my profile. All of my import statements went through. And let's try to serialize this first user. Well, when I run this, we can see that everything worked. Nothing changed. Well, what about on the creation of the object? Let's see what happens when I try to execute this top portion. I'm actually just going to run it up to here. Going to make a couple of spaces there and then run it. Well, now when I execute this, I get that my new user is valid and that it is true. So for nested objects, anything that's nested in serialization, all I have to add is, hey, this is only a read-only attribute, and we don't have to worry about it if we're going to be creating information. Right? So that way when it creates, it doesn't run into an invalid portion, and I could just run new user dot save. And there it is. My new object has been created. Now I have user2. And now we can move into my profile data. Well, for my profile, well, I can add something like, hey, new profile. I can make this equal to my profile serializer. My profile serializer can take in my data, which would be the profile data. And then I can ask, hey, is the new profile valid? And if so, I'll go ahead and save it. So let me grab all this information here. Let me add it. Okay, and when I run this, you can see that it is valid. It was able to run the new profile, and it runs it as true. Well, why is that? When I added a user of index 2, why is it able to read the user, even though when I come over to my serializers, I'm seeing that I am not including a user? Why could that be happening? Let me try to define this question a little better. Let's see what happens if I change this to fields. And for fields, I specify that I want my bio. I want to see the age. And let's just say I don't add user into my serializer. Right? Because that's all I have in here. Oh, I would also want to see something like ID. Okay, great. Now let's try to see what happens within my playground. And I'm actually going to move all of this up because my user has already been created and saved. Now we're only worrying about the profile. I'm going to run the shell, and I'm going to execute this information here. All right, so here I have my new profile. I went through my import statements. I created this dictionary. I passed in my data. I'm going to ask if it is valid. And it's telling me, hey, this is also true. But it's accepting the user to be of 2. Well, this serializer, when I'm passing in fields, it knows that I'm going to need this model of user, or it knows that I'm going to need to provide a foreign key relationship of user. If I were to not pass it in, it would fail. So I can leave this with the excludes attribute, or exclude, I'm sorry, and just take it off so that we don't have to worry about the user. All right, so now I can just run new profile dot save. And it looks like we have an error here, so no value in column user. Oh, nope. So there was an error there. We can see there that it was able to run it through the serializer, but we got the failing portion because even though the serializer wasn't looking for the user, my database is. All right, so we get an error there. There's a disalignment between my profile serializer and what my actual model was expecting. Let's run this one more time utilizing the excludes. Okay, I enter the shell. It is valid. But again, when I try to save it, it tells me, hey, this is impossible because you're trying to pass in null. All right. So the way to fix that is I have to come over to my serializer, and in here, I actually have to include all of the fields. I have to say fields is equal to all. Or at the very minimum, I actually have to include that user. Again, I go ahead and exit. I'm going to grab everything from the playground one more time. Go to execute it. We still get that it is valid. But now when I go to save it, I expect it to be successful. And we can see that the profile has been saved. Now it's saying this is object 4. So let's try to check out what it looks like within SQL. First, I want to see my app users. I have 2 of them as expected. And now if I go to see my profiles, I also have 2 of them. The reason why we're at 4, even though we never created a database entry for 2 and 3, is because every time I triggered this dot save, it also triggers that ID sequential table. Let me show it to all of us just in case we haven't seen it. Where we have our last value and our log count and how many times it's called. Every time this dot save happens, it triggers this last value and increments it by 1, regardless whether it makes a database entry or not. So that's why we're seeing that increment there from 1 to 4. All right. And that's how we work with serialization whenever we're creating or updating data. At this point, does anyone have any questions about how we change our serializers so that we can also work with nested serialization? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you give a recap? I got lost. We were bouncing back and forth, and it looked like a lot of the same things as what we had already done. So I got really lost as to like what we were doing and what we were trying to accomplish. And then all of a sudden things worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and do a quick recap here. So originally for a read serializer, we had this exclude method. And let me actually pull up our serializers as well so that we can see them both. That might make it a little bit hard. This should be good to read. All right. So originally we were working with the reading of data, where we want to make sure that we could read all of our data. And inside this app user, we wanted to nest the profile serializer. Everything worked great. But when we tried to actually create a new entry and we were trying to create an app user, well, the app user was telling us, hey, we need a user profile. But we couldn't create a user profile unless there was an entry for the user first. So in order to fix that, we came over and we changed the user profile attribute to read only equals true. Right? And that's what allowed us to actually create a new user without providing a profile. Now, when it came to the profile itself, which is up here, we have the excludes field saying that we wanted to exclude the user field. So when we're passing in data, and asking if it was valid. It was telling us it was valid because it was receiving a bio and an H, but it was never registering the user. So whenever we tried to actually save to the database would tell us, hey, there's an error here. Not Django, the database would return an error saying we need an actual value in order to make an entry, and you're not providing one. So we needed to update our serializer to include all fields. And then we were able to pass in this dictionary and actually make an entry into the data table. All right, so what we're trying to accomplish would be being able to create an element with our serializers and read an element with our serializers. Did that answer your question, Tom? All right, I see head nods. Any other questions? Now, additionally, I do want to add this in the mix. Um, you all can take it upon yourself to take a look into this, but there is a create method that can fall inside of your serializers here. So for example, you can come down and make a create method that takes in self, and you can specify how you want things to be created. You can also have a update method where you can specify how you want to update information. And lastly, you can have a read method where you can specify how you want information to be read. This is more of a, I want more hands-on. I want to be able to control exactly how data is being manipulated, when and how specific requirements come through. Um, when you're working with a finer application, you definitely want to do something like this, right? That way you can actually control how much data and you don't have repetitive fields whenever you're nesting your serializers. But it's a little bit beyond scope for what we actually need here at Code Platoon. Just know this exists, and I strongly encourage you all to go out there and get familiarized with these different methods and how to override them. All right. And that's going to conclude our one-to-one relationships. Does anyone have any questions about one-to-one relationships or serializers in regards to relationships? Great. Well, now since we broke everything down in so much detail when working through one-to-one relationships, we can kind of speed up during the many-to-one and the many-to-many relationships. So let's take a look at the next model here. All right. Well, in here we have our many-to-one relationships. In our many-to-one relationship, we could have something like an author in a book. Well, that's more of a many-to-many. Let's see. We can have many students to one class, right? Or one cohort here in Code Platoon. So we could specify the class of cohort, where we'd have models.model. That cohort would have a name, which would be models.charfield. And then we could create a class of student, where again, we would have a models.model. That student may have a first name. That student may have a last name. And then we want to specify what cohort they belong to. So we can say cohort is equal to models dot foreign key relationship, which would be many to one. So for this foreign key relationship, I would specify, hey, we're going to have a tie to the cohort. And by having this tie to the cohort, we would also have an onDelete.models.cascade. And we could specify related name would be students. All right. So there I have my cohort, my students that can be created. I can come over to Python and migrate both of these. Let's make migrations. Let's migrate. All right, so both of them were migrated. And now we can go back to our playground and try to work through this process of creating a couple of students. So many to many, or excuse me, many to one relationship, many students to one cohort. Okay, so here we can go into students, which for students, I believe I provided first name, last name. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do full name. That way it's a little easier to just create the dictionaries here. So I'm going to do full name. Here, let's do something like Tom. We can do cohort B1. Instead of Tom, we could have Rick. Whoa, easy there. And then we could have Chris. All right. So there's our 3 students that we'll be creating. All right. And then finally, we could have a cohort. All the cohort will be of name, where the name will be set to, let's call it Buffalo. All right. Now that we have a little bit of data, we can start thinking about what we want our serializers to look like. So let's start working with our serialization. I'm going to go ahead and do touch, many to one. And here I'm going to make a serializers dot py. From here, I'm going to say from REST framework dot models, or excuse me, serializers, import model serializers, and this is tripping me up. So let me go ahead and put this back to sleep because it seems like it has awakened. And then I can say from dot models, I want to import a student and a cohort. All right, so now I can specify, hey, I want the class of student serializer to be a model serializer. And I want it to have a class meta where the model is equal to the student. I want it to have a fields where the fields are going to be all. All right, so the student's pretty simple and basic, right? Well, now I'm going to create the cohort. The cohort will be a model serializer where I'll have a class meta. The model will be of cohort. And the fields will be equal to all. But now, if I take a look at my serializer and I compare it to my models, in my model, for my cohort, I should be able to see the students that I have available. And this is by the related name of students. So I could take this straight out of students, bring it over, and paste that in there, and then set it to a value. Well, the way I want to serialize this is by saying student serializer. Well, we discussed a little bit about how to create a nested serializer. We want to make sure that this is read only equals true. But there's something else that I want to clarify here. In our very first example, we had a one-to-one relationship. So we were only serializing one entry every time the serializer was being triggered. In this case, we have a many-to-many relationship, meaning many entries are being serialized by the student serializer. So what other attribute do I have to add to the student serializer on line 10?
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, of course. So the student serializer is going to be receiving a query set, meaning it's going to be receiving multiple entries. So it's got to receive another attribute in order to work with many entries rather than just working with one.
Fields?
Close. Tom?
Okay.
Wouldn't it need to be ID?
Okay, that's also close. And actually, what we need here is just going to be the argument of many is equal to true, right? Because we're receiving many entries at once. So we want to make sure that many is being organized. We're returning a list of dictionaries. All right, so now I have my serializers all ready to go. I have my models ready to go, and they have already been migrated. Now we can actually utilize them within the playground. So we can say from many to one app dot serializers. I want to import the following. Well, I'm gonna want to import my, oh, and I probably want to name this cohort serializer. That might be smart there. All right, let's go ahead and add our cohort. Let's add our cohort serializer, add our student, and our student serializer. All of my import statements have been made. I now want to be able to create a cohort. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do cohort. Be equal to my cohort serializer, where I'm going to pass in the data for a cohort. And then I just want to make sure that I'm able to save it. Let's do new cohort dot save. I'm actually not going to need this portion nor this portion. Actually, never mind. I'll bring them back just in case I need them. All right. So again, we're going to be creating a new cohort with the name of Buffalo. Let's make sure this works. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to run Python manage py, the shell. I'm going to paste this information. Okay, so we can see everything got imported. Here's the new cohort dictionary. We're passing it into the cohort data. And it looks like I'm trying to save before running is valid. So let me go ahead and fix that. It's not letting me fix it. Let me go ahead and press enter so we can see what it does. Okay, new cohort dot is valid. Okay, so it looks like it was true and it was able to validate our cohort. So now we can save it. And now a cohort has been saved. Let's take a look at the serialized data. Let's do new cohort dot data. Well, when I run new cohort dot data, I'm getting some sort of error here. So let's see, many to one app student dot f name of column. Oh, I see the error. It looks like I made migrations before changing the model itself. This error is not coming from anything within the code that we've written. It's coming because I deleted the last name and first name portion and just turned it into a full name and then never updated my migrations. I apologize, everyone. Let me go ahead and fix that really quick. Okay, so Python match py shell. Here I'm going to grab my cohort. I'm going to say from, this was many to one app dot serializers. I want to import my cohort serializer. I think I named it something else. I apologize.
You had a typo in serializers after app.
I see it. Thank you. There you go. All right, and now I can go ahead and grab that. So let's do cohort serializer, where I'm gonna pass in that cohort that I just grabbed, dot data. Let's see. I didn't migrate, did I? I just did maybe migrations, but didn't migrate. There you go. All right. Last attempt. I apologize, everyone. So let's do from cohort, or excuse me, from many to one app dot serializers. I want to import my cohort serializer. All right. And then I want to take a look at my cohort serializer, where what I want to see will be cohort.objects.first.data. And there you go. Now we can see our serializer here, where we have the ID of 1, the name of Buffalo, and the students. That error that we're running into was due to the fact that I changed this database model without making migrations and actually migrating into my database. So I apologize to everybody. But our serializer data does work. We were able to run our serializer to create a new entry for Buffalo. And currently the student array or the student list is empty because we don't have any students tied to it. Well, now let's actually go through the process of creating a couple of students. So here's my student serial, or here's all of my student objects. Now I'm just going to go ahead and create a student for each one of them. I'm going to quickly make a function here called create student. It's going to take in a student, and it's going to return none. Now for every student dictionary, I just want to create a student. So I'm going to say new student is equal to the student serializer that will take in the stud for the data. From here, I'll ask if that new student is valid. And then I'll say new student dot save if it is valid. Otherwise, I will print. And let me do this else. New student dot errors. And I'm seeing a question go up here. Give me a second here. Student saved. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Why do we need to have is valid in an if statement here before print versus when we just do it in the shell?
Yeah, it's a great question. So here I'm doing an if statement because if it is valid, I want to automatically save it. When I do it in the shell, I always run is valid prior to doing the save. I'm just not running the if because it's happening sequentially. So I can just see, hey, this is invalid. I know that if I try to trigger the dot save, it's going to raise an error. In this case, since I'm writing it in a function, I want to control the logic flow. And that's why I'm putting it in an if statement. Does that answer your question, Tom? All right, I see thumbs up. All right, so here we have our function for being able to create a new student. I'm gonna trickle down. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it here. So I'm gonna say from many to one app dot serializers. I want to import the student serializer just so we have it there available for us. Here's my function. And I can just utilize list comprehension to write everything out. Let's do for stud in students. I'm going to create a student where I'll be passing in a stud. All right, perfect. Let me go ahead and copy all of that. That's quite a bit of code. Let me go ahead and run the shell. All right, so here, we go through the process of actually passing in. I'm copying and pasting here. We can see that it's occupying the students list of dictionaries. It's creating the function. And then I'm running for student in students, student saved. And we can see that student saved is being registered 3 times. So a student was saved 3 times. That's awesome. Let's go ahead and take a look at the cohort one more time. I'm going to say cohort, or actually I'm going to go from many to one app dot serializers. I want to import the cohort serializer. I'm going to utilize the cohort serializer to take a look at the cohort. And see what the data attribute returns. Well, now I get the ID of entry 1. The name of that cohort is Buffalo. And if I take a look at each one of those students, well, now my students has a list of dictionaries where each dictionary is representing a student that's been entered in my database. Notice that all of them for the cohort have the ID of 1. And if I go to PSQL and take a look at that as well, say select all from many to one app where I want to see students. And here we can see Tom, Rick, and Chris, all of them tied to cohort of 1, which is Buffalo. Does anyone have any questions regarding the many to one relationships? Okay, awesome. Doesn't seem like we have any questions regarding many to one relationships. So let's move on into our very last one, which is going to be many to many relationships. Now, many to many relationships can be a little tricky. In this case, let's have the example where we have authors and books. Where many authors can work on many books. So here we can have a class of author, where the author is a models.model. Here the author can have, I don't know, a name, which will be a models.chart field. We can have a book, where we can have a title. And then we want to tie both of these to one another. Now, many-to-many relationships typically would require a connecting table, or I would have something like, hey, I want a book author. And I would strongly suggest that if you need to have a many-to-many relationship, that you manage it like this. So you would create a book author where you would have a book, where we would have models.foreign key relationship that goes over to a book. I just need to move that up. Where you can have the whole on delete models.cascade. And then you could also specify, hey, I could also need an author, where the author would be a foreign key relationship or an author. And you can have, again, the models.cascade. Right? This is the preferred method to do it. And I would strongly suggest that whenever you regulate a many-to-many relationship, you just manually create the connecting table. This is going to give you much better control over how data is connected, and you can manipulate your database yourself a lot better, especially programmatically. Now, luckily, if you don't want to do this, Django does provide us with a nice little shortcut where we can just say, all right, well, I want there to be authors. And for authors, I want to have a many to many relate field. And here I can specify where to. Well, this is going to be tied to an author. This does not take in an on delete method because it's many to many. You don't know if you're actually going to delete it, depending on if there is no authors. So it kind of leaves it up to you to try to implement the deletion of any sort of entry. But it does have a related name. So here for related name, I could add, hey, these are books that authors have worked with. Now, this works, and let's take a look at what happens to our database when we add this. So I'm going to go ahead and exit. I'm going to run Python manage.py, make migrations, Python manage.py, migrate, and now it's reflected inside of my database. All right. Well, let's take a look here. I'm going to run \d, and I'm looking for my many-to-many. So here we can see we have many-to-many app where I have an author. I have a many-to-many app where I have a book. And notice that I have a many-to-many app where I have book authors, right? So there's still a connecting table that's being created. It's just rather than being created where I'm controlling it and I'm able to manipulate it, Django is creating that connecting table for us in the background. And it's managing that connecting table for us in the background. Right? I never explicitly created it. This table here is being created by the many-to-many field. And Django is managing it in the background. Now, how does that affect me? Oh, let me go ahead and address some questions. Go ahead, Alex.
You said which one is best practice and gives you the most control?
Creating the
Creating.
actual table yourself.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Now, how does this affect me? Well, this author's many-to-many relationship is going to be accessed as a set within your program. And it's going to be represented as a set, meaning that it has the methods of add and delete. And all items within a set are unique. So keep that in mind whenever you're manipulating sets. Serializer wise, it doesn't really affect us much. Let's go ahead and create some serializers here. So I can go into my many to many app, create a serializers file. Excuse me. And for my serializer, I can say from REST framework dot serializers. I want to import the model serializer. I can also say from dot models. I want to import author and book. Here I can have my author serializer. Where I have my class meta, my model being the author, and I could have fields be equal to all. Same thing down below. I can have my class of book serializer. Well, I have my model serializer, class of meta, model of book, And then I can have my fields be equal to all. Now let's see what this looks like from within the playground. I'm going to create two authors and two books. Where author name, let's do something like Sam, and let's throw in Alex in here. And let's do some books, where for some books we have titles, where we have the SRP, and we have dry. Don't repeat yourself and single responsibility principle. Nice. Well, now we just need some functions, right? We need a function for creating author. And let me go ahead and import everything. So I'm going to say from many to many app dot serializers. I want to import my author serializer and my book serializer. All right, so from here, I'm going to pass in an author, which will be a dictionary. We're going to return none. I'll say new author is equal to author serializer, where the data is of the author. I'll specify if new author dot is valid, then new author dot safe. Else print new author dot errors. And let's go ahead and print author saved. Finally, we just want to add a for loop here. I'm going to say for author in authors. Let's create an author and pass in the author into the function. All right. Again, I'm grabbing my author serializer. I'm going to iterate through this list of dictionaries for authors. And I'm going to ask if it's valid to save it. Otherwise, I want to see the errors. Before I execute this block of code, does anyone have any questions over the function that we've created or the serializer that we've created? Let's hear it, Chris.
Yeah, with our minute one, or I know we had to establish like a read only and a mini attribute for the serializer. Do we not have to do that for the mini to mini?
That's a great question. And let's actually take a look at that so that we can see how it's managing it in the background. All right, because as of now, just like you mentioned, we're not calling that nested serializer. All right, from the author level, we're not necessarily, we don't have to include the books. So let's see what happens when we execute this block of code here. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to run Python, manage py shell, and then I'm going to paste all of my code. Okay, so it seems like it has a little bit of a syntax error here. Let me see what's happening. Okay, not a problem. Let's do for author and authors. Okay, now it's going into the next line. And here I can call the function of creating authors and pass in the author. Expected indented block, for statement. Okay, I'll do it again. So for author and authors. creating authors, author, creating authors is not defined. What did I name it? Did I not name it creating authors?
Yeah, I think you misspelled. I think it's Athos that you spelled.
Let me try this one more
Um,
time. I can see there was some spacing here. Okay. There you go. And now we're seeing that the author was saved. All right. So the author has been saved. If I go into P-SQL and I write my select query here and run select all from many to many app where I want to see my authors. There I can see Sam and Alex. If I try to take a look at author books or book authors, I apologize. You can see there's none. There is no book authors. Okay, well, now let's go through the same process and doing it for our books. Well, now I'm just going to simply copy and paste this information down below, iterate through my books, and trigger a function. So let's say for book in books. I'm not even going to bother in creating the function here. I'm just going to simply write it all out. I'm going to say new book is equal to my book serializer, where data is equal to the book. If new book dot is valid, then new book dot save, and we'll print. Actually, we'll just go ahead and print book saved. Else, we'll print new book dot errors. Let's see how it manages it this time. Because again, we're not actually calling or specifying anything regarding that many to many field. So let me go ahead and run this here. Come over to my shell. And actually, I don't even need to restart my shell. I can execute it. And I see that I get some fields errors here. So I get error detail for authors. This field is required. Okay, so it's telling me, hey, authors are required. I need to have an author. All right, well, now I can come back over to my playground, take a look here at my titles. And maybe for both of them, I want to have something like, hey, I have authors, where my authors will be set to 1. Notice I'm passing it in within the list. Okay, let's see what happens when I execute it this way. Well, now when I execute it, it's actually able to save it for each one of them. So whichever model is holding it is the one that's actually going to require a list in order to be able to create that connection. Now in P-SQL, if I run select all from book authors, you can see that the many-to-many connection is being made. Well, let's say I wanted to alter this. All right. I have my very first book. And I grab this from book, the objects, not first. Now, when I take a look at this first book, I can serialize it, of course, and take a look at it. But first, I want to see all these fields that are available to me. So if I try to run first book, you'll see that I get book 1. Let's see, first book dot title. I get SRP. And if I run first book dot authors, here's what I get. I get, hey, this is a Django field created forwards, many-to-many relationship. Well, this doesn't give me much information. But if I run first book dot authors dot all, well, that actually returns to me another query set. Right? So dot authors is just going to tell me, hey, this is going to be a model connection, and then I have to query that model connection. In this case, I want all of them, so it's returning to me all. I can also add to the author, so I can say first book dot authors dot add, and add that second author. You'll see that was executed. And now when I run dot all, it's going to show me both entries for both authors. All right, so that's why I'm saying, this is why I say it's a pain to handle it if you're just utilizing the many-to-many field. I think it was meant to be a shortcut, but I really discourage utilizing something like this to handle many-to-many relationships. I strongly encourage everybody, just create the connecting table yourself and manage it that way. That way you have more control over all of your fields. All right. Does anyone have any questions regarding many-to-many relationships? All right. If no one has any questions over many-to-many relationships, we have now covered all 3 different types of relationships that we can make in Django. And now we're going to go back to our Pokemon project, apply some of these relationships by applying a many-to-many relationship. And then we're going to talk about a serializer method field. Before doing that, we've been going on for quite a while. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then continue on at 11:15. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see everybody back in time. All right, welcome back, everyone. So now that we've dove deep into serializers, let's actually apply them back into our project. So now in our Pokemon app, we can go ahead and come over to our models. We've already created our move app, and inside the admin site, we also registered it so that we can interact with it in the admin site. Well, now let's actually connect it. Let's make a move portion. Right here, I'm going to have moves that will be attached to different Pokemon. And I'm actually going to make Pokemon carry this many-to-many connection. So I'll go ahead and come on over to the Pokemon model. I'll come over here. And at the very bottom, I'll go ahead and add moves, where moves will be of models.many-to-many field. And it will be attached to a move with the related name of Pokemon. Now here you can see that move isn't being highlighted. That's because I have to actually import it. So I can say from move app.models, I want to import move. Great. So now I have the move being able to be accessible. I can see that all of my models are in there. Before I go into actually creating this change, I'm going to comment it out really quick. I'm just going to back up all of my data that I currently have just to make sure that I don't break it. So here I'm going to go ahead and exit. I'm going to run Python manage py dump data. I'm going to do this from the Pokemon app. Oh, I'm in the wrong project. I apologize, everyone. Okay, there you go. So now Python manage py dump data from the Pokemon app dot Pokemon. dash dash indent 2. And I'm going to dump it inside of the Pokemon app fixtures. Today's the 24th, so I'll go ahead and add that in there. I'll say Pokemon data of November 24.json. All right, it looks like all of that has been added. If I take a look at my fixtures now, here I have November 24 that holds all of my Pokemon. And now I can actually apply that update and make some migrations. So let's see what that looks like. I'll say Python manage py make migrations. All right, so here we can see I added a field to the Pokemon, and I can Python manage py migrate. And now I've migrated the field to my Pokemon. Now let's take a look at what this looks like on the admin side perspective. You can run Python manage py run server. It's going to get my server running. Let me go to the admin site here for the user. There's my user. Currently, I don't have any moves, so let's go ahead and create a couple. Let's have Psychic. Let's do save and add another. Let's do Thunder. Save and add another. And let's do Firewall. Why not? Save. All right, so there you can see that all 3 of my moves have been created. Okay, that's great. But what does that really mean for me? Well, now when I go into my Pokemon, I can come over to take a look at, for example, Charizard. And if I scroll down, I can see that there are some moves that I can select. Well, for these moves, I can select one. And if I want to select multiple, you'll see that it tells me, hey, hold down Control or Command to select more than one. Say, hey, I want to hold both of these. I can click on this green button if I wanted to add a new move. In this case, I don't. Oh, well, it's not going to let me come out. So let's go ahead and do Steel Wing here. All right, so now Steel Wing, Fire Wheel, and Psychic have been selected. If I save it and I come over to look at Charizard, you can see that all 3 of those have continued to be selected. And if I come over to PSQL, all of that will be demonstrated. Excuse me, everybody. From my Pokemon app, Pokemon. And here I want to also see moves. And you can see here that the Pokemon of Charizard now knows 3 separate moves. All right, so all of that was saved. And I have made my many-to-many connection to all of the different moves. Okay, great. Well, what about serializer-wise? Because as of right now, my Pokemon serializer is probably not going to show my moves. I have to actually add it. Well, I can come over to my Pokemon app, open up serializers.py, and here I'm going to change a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and specify that I want to serialize moves. And this will be a model, or excuse me, a method field serializer. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring this serializer method field. I'm going to add it. Where this serializer method field, I'm going to try to add this read only attribute and see if that works as well. Change that to true. And then I'm going to specify what field it is that I'm going to be working with. Well, currently it's working with moves, and I'm calling it a serializer method field. Well, what does that mean? That means that I have to create a method to actually grab my moves. And this is where some standard convention comes in. This get underscore is going to fall under any serialized method fields. So serialized method field is going to look for the convention of get underscore and then the name of the attribute that we're naming. So in this case, the name would be moves. So it would be get moves that's being looked for. We would pass in self and the instance. In this case, self is in reference to the class, and instance is in reference to the instance of the Pokemon model. So now I'm going to grab moves is equal to instance dot moves dot all. So all of the moves that belong to that one instance. Then I'll create a name for it. So I'll say moves again is equal to move dot name for move in moves. And then I'll just simply return moves as my final statement. All right, I could definitely skip a couple of steps here. I could probably just take that out and move it in here. That would also work. I'm essentially grabbing all of that many-to-many relationship, only returning a list of names, and that's all that's being returned there. So let's take a look at what our Pokemon serializer looks like now. Gonna Control C here. I'm going to now grab Charizard from within my Python shell. So again, I'll do Python manage py shell. In here, I'll say from Pokemon app dot serializers. I want to import my Pokemon serializer. Okay, now I'm going to grab Charizard by saying this is equal to Pokemon dot objects dot get, where name is equal to Charizard. Okay, let's make sure that that worked. Okay, so I see Pokemon Charizard is at level 36 and is captured. Awesome, so I was able to retrieve it from my database correctly. Now let's see what it looks like when it gets serialized. We can run Pokemon serializer, pass in Charizard as the object, and do .data. And now when we run this, we can see that all of the attributes belonging to Charizard are being demonstrated. And if we look at the moves, we see Psychic, Fire Wheel, and Steel Wing. Right? So again, the method serializer looks for a get underscore attribute method. The attribute that we're naming is moves. So we have to name this method down here, get moves, in order for it to work properly. It's then querying the database to grab all of the moves in that many-to-many relationship that's connected to this one Pokemon, and only returning a list of names. Does anyone have any questions over the serializer method field? All right, doesn't look like we have any questions. So let's go ahead and add a serializer for moves. You can come over to my move app. We can see my move app doesn't have any serializers. So I can simply exit. I can touch move app serializers.py. Now in serializers.py, I can go ahead and create a class, or excuse me, I can say from REST framework dot serializers. I want to import model serializer. From this model serializer, I just want to go ahead and say from dot models. I want to import the move. And now we can go into class move serializer, within the model serializer. We can establish our class meta where the model is of move and the fields are simply of all. Well, why would we do something like this, right? What's the point of this portion? Well, now that we created this serializer, we can utilize it within our serializer method field. All right, so we're back to our Pokemon serializer. Here I can say from move app dot serializers. I want to import the move serializer. And if I didn't just want to grab all of these names and I actually wanted to serialize the data and represent it by each object, well, I can just go and state this is going to be from the move serializer, where many is equal to true. And then what I would return will be moves.data. All right, so let's look at the difference of what we had at first, which was just a list of names. And let's see what we have now. I'm gonna run into the shell. I'm gonna grab Charizard again. So Charizard is equal to Pokemon dot objects dot get, where name is equal to Charizard. And it seems like I'm getting an error here, likely because I spelled Charizard wrong. I did. It's going to be with a capital C. All right, so now I have Charizard. And now I can go ahead and serialize it. So I can say Pokemon or say from Pokemon app. Now serializers. I want to import the Pokemon serializer. And now let's take a look. Pokemon serializer, which takes in Charizard dot data. Now for the moves attribute, we have a list of dictionaries where each dictionary is representing a specific move. All right, so there's a couple of ways of doing the serialization process. All right, does anyone have any questions about the move serializer or how we manage relationships within Django? All right, if no one has any questions, then this is going to conclude part 1 of our lecture. Let me go ahead and stop the recording here.